your contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Permit me to join, Mr. Speaker, with those who have expressed congratulations to Senior Minister with responsibilities of finance under the Office of the President, Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, and his team of dedicated staff members for once again producing budget estimates for 2021 under the theme, A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience, and for continuing to make all of us as Guyanese proud. Mr. Speaker, this budget is presented to Guyana a mere 6 months since the People's Progressive Party Civic was declared the winner of the March 2nd, 2020 general and regional elections, and Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali was sworn in as the 9th Executive President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this mandate that was given by the people and the citizens of Guyana is a mandate to restore constitutionality, to restore law and order, economic stability, sustained economic growth, and to return our dear land Guyana to her position of pride, respect, and admiration by her citizens locally and in the diaspora, as well as her friends and allies over the world. Mr. Speaker, when the debate began this morning, the honorable member on the opposite side of this House began by telling us two things. One, she made mention about parliamentary democracy. And two, she resorted to tell this honorable House that she is a student of history. Mr. Speaker, there is a saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. More importantly, we must consider that those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Mr. Speaker, lessons from the past provide valuable insights for the present and understandings for the future. Therefore, Mr. Speaker and honorable members of this House, it is important to look back in order for us to shape our future. Mr. Speaker, in so reflecting back, it is very sad that a very honorable member is missing from this House so that we can give her some history lessons. Mr. Speaker, let's go to their history. It is undeniable historical fact that the People's National Congress, now perhaps they have a deed poll, so they are now APNU AFC, they rigged elections in this country from 1968, 1973, 1980, and 1985. They also rigged the referendum of 1978. Mr. Speaker, in 1992, 1997, and 2001, when they lost the elections, they organized protests. The People's National Congress organized protests that turned violent. Citizens of this country were beaten, robbed, and harassed in the streets of the nation's capital. Mr. Speaker, the then leader of the opposition coined the slogan, and that slogan was, slow fire, more fire. Slow fire, more fire, Mr. Speaker, that is the history. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member could not have had to go away this afternoon, because history lessons were about to be taught to them. Mr. Speaker, this legacy and value system within that political organization does not permit it to operate within democratic norms. For a matter of fact, the very DNA of that political party is a result of the shenanigans we saw in our last elections. Mr. Speaker, that political party is only about party paramountcy, totalitarian government, and lack of adherence to democratic norms. Of course, Mr. Speaker, when I speak of the honorable members on the opposite side of this House, I'm excluding the Honorable Mr. Schuman from this, because those honorable members ought to remember that a political party called the PNC, the People's National Congress, is a party that was responsible and a government that was responsible for banning basic food items in this country and criminalizing the possession of basic food items such as flour. Mr. Speaker, a government which decides what the people will consume, how would that government allow the people to make a democratic choice of electing a government? The government under the PNC, the People's National Congress, nationalized or confiscated private property, resulting in the People's National Congress control over the economy. There was hardly, Mr. Speaker, any distinction between the People's National Congress and the state, or vice versa. Mr. Speaker, Guyana and Guyanese must never forget that a PNC flag was flown over the courts of appeal. And today, these honorable members on the opposite side that belongs to the APNU AFC, formerly the PNC, cannot come to this honorable House to preach democracy and parliamentary democracy to us. Mr. Speaker, members of that political grouping has no moral authority to speak about democracy. 28 years of PNC dictatorship and rigged elections destroyed Guyana and reduced us to an officially described highly indebted economy. Mr. Speaker, when the People's Progressive Party Civic came into office in '92, we were kids, we knew what went on. Mr. Speaker, we had a total national debt of $2.1 billion US dollars. 96 cents of every dollar we earned used to go towards repayment of debt. By 2012, Mr. Speaker, in 1992, our per capita income was a mere $250 US dollars, and our GDP was a mere $371 million US dollars. By 2015, when the People's Progressive Party left government, our gross domestic product was $4,280 million US dollars, and our per capita income was somewhere around $5,580 US dollars. By 2012, Mr. Speaker, 10 cents of every dollar was used for the repayment of national debts. That is what the People's Progressive Party Civic did for this country. Manage the affairs of this country in a very prudent manner. Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC, I call them the PNC, failed to fulfill every manifesto promise they made to the Guyanese people during the 2015-2020 term. Their much touted 100-day plan is yet to commence. But instead, we were hit by one scandal after the next. In America, there was a famous TV serial scandal. The Shonda Rhimes TV serial scandal. Mr. Speaker, they have enough material for the revival of that program in the AP and UAFC. I will list some of them here. The Durban Park scandal, the Drug One scandal, the gold bracelet scandal, the Demerara Harbour Bridge feasibility scandal, the Larry London birth certificate scandal, the barbershop scandal, the Ocean View COVID hospital scandal. And Mr. Speaker, and if that was not enough, we had the firing of 7,000 sugar workers and 2,000 CSO workers, the closure of 4 sugar estates, illegally appointing the chairman of GCOM in breach of our constitution, the loss of no confidence votes and refusal to call an election, Mr. Speaker, and illegally occupying government for almost 12 months. And on top of that, insult to injury, Mr. Speaker, we were told and we were listening to a campaign of decency and honesty. Mr. Speaker, there were blatant attempts to rig the elections and intimidating and harassing the international accredited election observers. Mr. Speaker, when they demitted office on the 2nd of August 2020, the Bank of Guyana report showed $83.2 billion in overdraft, and the Treasury bill was another 77 billion. Mr. Speaker, these are just grains of sand on the beach of the corruption under the APNU AFC. Mr. Speaker, our government has taken a proactive approach in managing the affairs of Guyana. We have taken very prudent economic measures to avert a financial crisis. August last year, under his leadership, the President, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, in a mere 6 months, we have our progress report. Part of it, we reversed VAT on electricity and water, provision of 25,000 COVID-19 relief per household, removal of VAT on building and construction materials, removal of VAT on cellular phones, removal of 25% corporate tax on education, removal of 25% corporate tax on health and VAT on medical supplies, old age pension increased to 25,000 effective 1st January 2021. Pensioners will benefit from free water services, $150 million to support COVID-19 frontline workers, 15,000 cash grant for school children effective from 1st January 2021, which was taken away from the children of this country. Uniform voucher allowance doubled to 4,000, removal of VAT on hinterland travel, removal of VAT on agricultural equipment, reduction in D&I charges. We began the process of reopening the closed sugar estates. We placed $27 billion already towards this. Mr. Speaker, our Honorable Minister within the Ministry of Housing reported this morning to the National Assembly 3,600 house lots were distributed from August to December. Mr. Speaker, more importantly, we have taken government to the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, permit me to now turn our attention to the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, agriculture is the backbone of our national economy. Successive People's Progressive Party civic-led governments have long recognized this and have been placing tremendous emphasis on this sector. Mr. Speaker, the previous Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Noel Holder, he once said, government has no responsibility to farmers. Rice is a private business. There was not just a slip of the tongue. Mr. Speaker, this represents the ideology of the People's National Congress. An ideology, Mr. Speaker, that does not view agriculture sector as the backbone of the economy, and one which provides the basic sustenance for citizens and now materials for industrialization. Mr. Speaker, Charles Jordan once said, "What people do not understand, they do not value. What they do not value, they will not protect. And what they do not protect, they will lose." Obviously, the honorable members on the opposite side of this House, coming from the APNU AFC, by virtue of their actions and utterances, refused to acknowledge and value agriculture. In so doing, they not only lost the opportunity to take natural resources and convert them into wealth, but also lost the right to govern in the process. Mr. Speaker, during 1957 to 1964 period, while Dr. Jagan was in government, he transformed the agriculture sector through sound agricultural practices, programs, and policies. Mr. Speaker, it was during this period that Guyana was referred to as the breadbasket of the Caribbean. The Black Bush Polder agricultural scheme was one of the largest in Guyana, and if not in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, sadly, after the People's National Congress was placed into office post-December 1964 elections, this gain was drastically reversed. Political pressures on food producers led to systematic destruction. of Guyana's food potentials as a result of the anti-agricultural policies. Mr. Speaker, the first anti-agricultural policy was directed towards the rice industry. The government then, under the PNC, undemocratically imposed the Rice Marketing Board. Mr. Speaker, the People's National Congress government mandated that all the paddy be sold to the government at low price. It then resold the milled rice at the world market at a higher price, but refused to pass some of those profits directly to the farmers or to invest it in the agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, the rice industry was instead used as a cash cow for the then PNC government to fulfill its dictatorial agenda. Mr. Speaker, that PNC government removed subsidies on agricultural inputs and agricultural equipment and machinery. In the mid-70s, the PNC launched the FCH program, the Food, Clothing and Housing Program, which was a monumental failure because of its own spiteful programs against the agriculture, the farmers.
Honourable Member, we will need an extension for you to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask for 5 minutes for the colleague to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Member, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before the 2015 elections, the APNU AFC promised the farmers, the rice farmers, $9,000 per bag of paddy. And they promised to transform the agricultural sector with incentives and subsidies. These promises, Mr. Speaker, were never realized. Instead, active steps were taken to punish the rice farmers. The closing of the sugar estates and putting on the breadline 7,000 sugar workers. And Mr. Speaker, adding insult to injury, the sugar workers had to resort to the courts against the Gradle-led administration for payment of the legal severance. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party Civic in 2020 elections promised the sugar workers and Guyanese that the sugar estates will be reopened. Mr. Speaker, we are aggressively working towards achieving the same. Mr. Speaker, APNU AFC government increased land lease, rental charges, DNI charges, introduced VAT on agricultural inputs, removed subsidies on agricultural machinery. Mr. Speaker, these draconian agricultural policies and measures imposed by the APNU AFC government were reversed by our government in October 2020. Mr. Speaker, when this 12th Parliament brought bills to this Honourable House to reverse all the increased fees and taxes imposed by the APNU AFC, the Honourable members from that side of the House belonging to APNU AFC did not attend the session to defend these measures. Mr. Speaker, I know, and everyone knows, there is no defense. Mr. Speaker, this reversal will result in almost $1.3 billion annually back in the hands of farmers under the Mahaika-Maikoni-Abari Agricultural Development Authority, as pointed out by our Honourable Minister of Finance in his budget speech. Mr. Speaker, again, the APNU AFC launched a commission of inquiry into sugar, and that commission of inquiry recommended not to close any estates. Mr. Speaker, the Granger administration went against those very recommendations because it did not suit their agenda. The result, $70 million of our taxpayers' monies went to waste. Mr. Speaker, a $30 billion syndicated bond was acquired by the APNU AFC to reorganize the sugar industry, as what they said. $17 billion was spent and cannot be accounted for by the previous administration. And we must never forget also, there was an $80 million US signing bonus that went into the thin air. Nobody knew where it had gone. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to Region 3, the region I live all my life in this country. That region, Mr. Speaker, saw transformation in the housing sector under successive People's Progressive Party civic government. Mr. Speaker, we developed Tushin New Housing Scheme Phase 1 and 2, Zealot Phase 1, 2 and 3, Zeeburg de William, iFlood Housing Scheme, Lenora Housing Scheme, Cornelia Housing Scheme, Parfait Harmony Housing Scheme. Mr. Speaker, ask the APNU AFC in Region 3 which one they created. There is none, Mr. Speaker. That is why the people of this country, they witnessed, those who did not witness the PNC, they have seen the APNU AFC in action. And that is why we are here back in government and the APNU AFC is in the opposition. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.